I used to live just a few houses up the road. The house that I was in was a gorgeous old villa. And I was doing the gardening in the front yard, and these two delightful old ladies came wandering up the road, and they said, "Oh, what a lovely house, and how's the gardening going?" And then one of them leaned across the gate and said, "Have you seen that house they're building down the road?"
You could argue that Andrew's the closest thing that we have to a star architect in New Zealand. You know, someone whose architecture is kind of deliberately kind of flamboyant and splashy, and not seeing that kind of reference to the kind of genealogies of New Zealand architecture, of the whare, of the woolshed, all of that stuff. There's an amount of freedom that comes with that, of not needing to fit in, of not needing to kind of conform.
I've got a really restless mind, and I've got it's a really talented group of people that I work with, and if we could just photocopy a design, it would be a lot easier, but we're always trying to invent something new.
My version of Andrew is that he's a visual architect as opposed to a kind of conceptually driven architect, and that his work's kind of transitioned through a whole lot of different styles, and he's worked in kind of modernist styles and stuff, and worked with very contemporary, also stuff that's historicist, is that he's got an incredibly good eye. He's not someone that's kind of coming from a fixed conceptual point, but he's got an amazing eye for materials, for proportions, for spaces, for light, and that the architecture's driven by that. And that's kind of what accounts for the variability in his architecture and his kind of willingness to try a whole lot of different approaches.
I've learned always to design coastal houses from the water. Yeah. So sometimes that involves swimming out. We cut our teeth on coastal houses. The first house we did in Kerikeri was a coastal house, and then we did some at PR. And we've continued doing West Coast houses, and then East Coast houses came into the mix. And that's how the practice started. I was trying to think about how we could do buildings in New Zealand which are more New Zealand, rather than just push New Zealand down the route of being like everywhere else. So this was an attempt to find something that's uniquely New Zealand. So it's a sky building, and it was unusual because it was a car park that was going to have a bit of office on the top. The whole plan of the building is the same as the tarpcloth pattern, so the whole building's a parallelogram. Oh, yeah. So you notice the courtyard is a parallelogram? Yeah. Yeah, and the shape of the site is a parallelogram, and the pattern's a parallelogram. And even the spaces are parallelograms. I got a little bit obsessed with parallelograms.
Because the buildings have such a strong presence and have a kind of unique use of materials, I mean, it's pretty easy to look at lots of buildings and think, oh, you could turn that quite easily into a logo for the organisation that occupies it. And I think that sense of creating an identity for the building does come out in things like the names and the way that the buildings are explained.
I'll tell you where the name came from. It came from Gotham City, the Axis factory in Gotham City, because it was a time that we wanted to invent a new history for the buildings that's slightly more exciting than the history that it had. And Gotham City's like that, isn't it? It's like a parallel story, parallel universe in America. It's just, it's America, but it's America with superheroes. We designed it for a shootout, actually. The Joker can climb up this ladder and leap over the wall, and Batman can, swing around here. So you can actually, have a gangster chase right around the whole building.
Was this in your presentation to the client?
No, I don't. I think we might have missed that detail.
I think his architecture is much more connected internationally, perhaps in some ways perhaps more than anyone else kind of currently active. One of the things that's characteristic about contemporary architecture is almost a kind of home run approach. You know, you develop a building, you make a kind of great project, and then the next time you sit down to make a project, you start again from the beginning. I think Andrew's one of the kind of key people in New Zealand who's adopting that approach, which I think of as one of the kind of hallmarks of contemporary architecture internationally.
Four architects were shortlisted, and their brief was to not propose any designs at any point, but to simply talk about the architect's firm's philosophy about making architecture, and secondly their quality assurance, how they would go about quality assurance, and they each had half a day. At the end of the meeting, the last architect left, and Sir Miles Warren turned to the panel and just said, "There was one architect in the room, it's Andrew, I'm going home." So he left. It was one statement. Andrew Patterson was it. He left, he went back to his hotel, and then the rest of us debated until 2 o'clock in the morning, and at the end of that, it was Andrew Patterson.
The concept happened really very quickly. It was one of those occasions that the building looks exactly like the concept. You'd have to be playing spot the difference to, even in plan, to figure out how the building differs from the very initial drawings. And the stainless steel was very material to the story, because he came to New Plymouth because they had this terrific stainless steel industry, and it was the only way he could realise the big work that he wanted to do. Yeah, and the building is in stainless steel for exactly the same reason, because we could get it's a kind of the local stone of Taranaki, if you like.
It was very important that the people of New Plymouth were taken on this quite marvellous journey to where it is now. As you drive into New Plymouth, the welcome to New Plymouth is the Len Lye Centre, and that's exactly what Andrew defines. And if you walk either outside the building on Queen Street, or you're walking inside those marvellous concrete columns, it's almost like the 24 frames of second film clicking past you as these flashes of light intersperse.
I think what I'm most pleased about is, until the last 100 years, of course, classicism's been this whole genre in architecture, hasn't it? I was just so delighted to do a kind of a new take on it. It's quite hard to do a new take on something that's been done and done again.
I remember we showed it to the then Arts Minister, Christopher Finlayson. I showed him the brochure and he said, "But Rana, this is world class." And you know, we never use the word world class, do we? But he hit it.